I want to say everybody welcome and please accept our obeisances. Today we're here to listen to Mahayogi Prabhu. He is a truth seeker who spent more than 45 years in his spiritual search and in spiritual practice. And today he will tell us about the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Gita Talks, it is the course of it is the online course of learning Bhagavad Gita, and every week we will be listening to and discussing one of the chapters of the Gita. Maybe to some chapters we will meet for some chapters several times because they may be rich in meanings. And so today Mahayogi Prabhu will tell us about the second chapter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rajasundari. So it's important to begin a meeting with a bit of an invocation, so I don't want to take too much of your time, but let's just pray to the Guru and the Vaishnavas. Om Jnana Timarangasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vanchakalpatrubhyascha Kripasindhubhyeva cha Patitanam Pavanabhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. And for the Bhagavad Gita, Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devam Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayat Sarvo Panishado Gavo Dugda Gopalananda Parto Vatsa Sudhir Bhokta Dugdam Gitamritam Mahat. The Gita Upanishad, or Bhagavad Gita, it collects all the Upanishads in one place, and it's compared to a cow. So Lord Krishna, who's a cowherd boy, Gopalanandana, he's milking the cow and giving us the essence. And Arjuna's place is like the calf, because when you milk a cow, the mother cow likes to see the calf, and that gives her inspiration to give milk. And so this Gitamritam is the result. Gitamritam, Amrita means positive and progressive immortality, but also nectar. So the sweet nectar of the Gita is coming, and those who are Sudhir, they can appreciate it. Ekam Shastram Devaki Putra Gitam, Eko Devo Devaki Putra Eva, Eko Mantras, Tasya Namami Jani, Karma Pyak Ekam, Tasya Devasya Seva. So, Ekam Shastram, let there be one Shastra, Devaki Putra Gita, the Gita of the son of Devaki. Eko Devo, Devaki Putra Eva, and certainly also let there be one God, the son of Devaki. Eko Mantras, Tasya Namami Jani, and one mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Karma Pyekam Tasya Devasya Seva. And let there be only one karma or work to be done, the service of the son of Devaki, Devaki Putra, or Sri Krishna. So the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita this is sometimes called Sankhya Yoga. At the end of every chapter, there's a chapter title. And the chapter title that's given here is Sankhya Yoga. So there's a lot of speculation about what does that mean, Sankhya? Sankhya, it means to count. It means to break something down, to break it down into pieces so we can see what it is. Or in other words, analysis. So in the second chapter of the Gita, there are two things which are really analyzed in detail. One is ontology, or the nature of being. and the other is ethics, or what to do. Put very simply, if you need to break down the Gita and look at the second chapter and see, okay, what's he talking about here? He's talking about ontology. What's the nature of being? And he's also talking about ethics. What is to be done? Put very simply. And there's a bit of an argument here between Arjuna and Krishna, in that Arjuna begins by saying, I have my duty, but now my duty has become so difficult that I can't do it. And so Krishna, before he gets into discussing what is to be done, or ethics, or what dharma is, he wants to explain the nature of the soul. Later, he'll bring it back, and he'll point out that given the nature of the soul, it implies a certain kind of self-interest, a certain kind of duty or dharma. But in the very beginning, he wants to raise the discussion to a higher platform. And he begins by explaining that the soul, or the Atma, is eternal, and it survives the death of the body. In fact, moves from one body to the next, evolving consciously from one lifetime to the next. He explains to Arjuna, and here, keep in mind that Arjuna represents us. Arjuna is as perfect a hero as you can find in this world. And so as we move through this world of adventure, and we're heroes of our own adventure, Arjuna is representative. We don't take it that the Bhagavad Gita is a metaphor and that everything has a metaphoric meaning. But in a way, Arjuna stands for us, and his questions stand for us. So when Krishna is speaking as Arjuna's guru, he's speaking as the guru of all of us. And he tells us that this temporary world has no eternal reality. And as such, it's a kind of illusion. And wisdom means you can understand the difference between temporary and eternal reality. And later on, temporary duty and eternal duty. And he explains that just as a person puts on new clothes, leaving aside the old and useless ones, we change bodies from one lifetime to the next. So let me read a little bit from the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita here, all right? So Sanjaya is reporting the conversation to Dhritarashtra. And sometimes the Bhagavad Gita is criticized because if you hold it up to the poetry of Kalidas or some of the really brilliant Sanskrit poets of the ancient world, it seems like their poetry is superior to the very sort of simple Sanskrit language of the Bhagavad Gita. In fact, anyone who studies Sanskrit will be given Bhagavad Gita within the first or second year as a simple example of a great text. And the real poets like Kalidas are reserved for a more difficult study, a more advanced level of Sanskrit. So some scholars try to say that because the easy language of the Bhagavad Gita is so simple, it shouldn't really stand up as a great classic of the language, to which it must be replied that the message is simple because it's meant to be understood simply. And we find that more than 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years later, people are still reading the Bhagavad Gita and finding its message a very powerful one. So here in this chapter, we see Krishna explaining in very clear, very simple language exactly what the soul is, what is the Atma, and what are its qualities. And this is maybe, we don't know how old, but maybe 1,000 years before Plato and Plotinus, who kind of take up the idea of the soul, but they're not very sure. As philosophers, their position on the soul is very sketchy. And if you look at the Bible, again, it's hard to decipher what is meant by the soul. They talk about it a little bit, eternal life. But there's a lot of problems in so-called Catholic theology. For example, how can the soul suffer hell eternally? And how can it be that if you believe in Jesus, for example, then you gain eternal life? But if you don't believe in him, you don't have eternal life. So who's living? What's the nature of the soul? And what's the nature of eternal life if it can be granted by a kind of belief? So here in the Bhagavad Gita, which predates the Bible by some thousands of years, we find these questions dealt with. And they don't really get taken up again in the Catholic Church until the time of maybe St. Augustine with the City of God, and later really reflected on by Thomas Aquinas, who owes a lot to Aristotle and Plato. But even in Thomas Aquinas and the subsequent teachings of the Church, the idea of the soul is not very well defined. So it fascinates me that in the Bhagavad Gita, this is dealt with. But first, Sanjay begins talking about Arjuna's compassion. So let's pick up where we left off. Sanjay uvacha tam tata kripaya vishtam ashu purnakulekshanam vishidantam midam vakyam uvacha madhusudana. And it's very nice. It says uvacha madhusudana. It means Krishna is speaking here, but Krishna is speaking as the killer of the Madhu demon. So he's going to kill all the different doubts that Arjuna and also you and I have. And so Sanjaya says, seeing Arjuna full of compassion, his mind depressed, his eyes full of tears, Madhusudana, Krishna, spoke the following words. Kutastva kashmalamidam vishame samupastita anarya justam ashvaryam akirti karamarjuna. And so Krishna says, my dear Arjuna, where did you get this impurity, this kashmalam, this dirtiness of the soul? How did you become so contaminated with these bad ideas? He says they're not fit for a man who knows the value of life, and they don't lead to higher planets, but to infamy. So he says, this is not your position to talk like this. Wake up. Klaibhyam ma smagama parta, naitat tvai upapadyate, shudram hridaya dorabalyam, shakpo tishta parantapa. So he's calling Arjuna Parantapa, which means the chastiser of enemies. And he says, don't yield to this weakness. So we all face temptation. We all face weakness. We all face adversity. And sometimes we're overcome by adversity. But Krishna is telling Arjuna, have faith. And Arjuna, this is a conversation. So Arjuna doesn't just say, oh, yeah, okay, I'm going to have faith. Sure. It's like when we're depressed, somebody says, cheer up. So depression is very difficult. You can't just tell someone, cheer up, go back to work. It doesn't always work like that. So Arjuna puts forth his argument again. And he says, how can I counterattack an arrows in battle? Men like Bhishma and Drona, who are worthy of my worship. It would be better to live in this world by begging than to kill the great souls who are my teachers, Guruna Hatva. He's saying, you're asking me to kill my guru. And if I kill, then everything will be spoiled with blood. And we don't know which is better, conquering them or being conquered by them. If we kill the sons of Dhritarashtra, we should not care to live. And then this verse is interesting. He says, Karpanya dosho pahata svabhava prichchami tvam dharma samudacheta yashtreyasyan nishchitan bruhitan me shishyasteham shadimam tam prapana. So this is a nice verse because it has the word prapana, which means surrender. So he says, I don't know what to do. I'm confused. I feel kripa, which is interesting because we say vancha kalpa tarubhyascha kripa sindhu bhyevacha. We always glorify the devotees for being an ocean of kripa, of compassion. But here, compassion is a weakness. Arjuna can't do his duty because he's overcome by weakness. So he says, in this condition, I'm asking you to tell me what's best for me. He doesn't know what dharma, he says, I don't know what dharma is anymore. Is this dharma? So he concludes saying, Shishyashteham Shadimam Tvam Prapana. I want to be your shishya. I want to take shiksha. I want you to be my guru. So this is a very important part of life when we come to the point where we say, I can't do this anymore. I need help. I can't be alone. Help me. And we try to find someone who knows more than we do, or who understands things better than we do. And sometimes early in life, it could be our mother, and later our brothers and our father. And we see that's insufficient, so we find a teacher. But those who teach us material abilities may not give us the satisfaction of our soul. So we seek out a spiritual master. And this is what Arjuna does. He says, I can find no means to drive away this grief. Even if I win heaven, still, this is not making me happy. So Srila Prabhupada, Bhaktivedanta Swami, comments that academic knowledge, scholarship, high position, they're all useless in solving the problems of life. Help can only be given by a spiritual master like Krishna. Therefore, the conclusion is that a spiritual master who is 100% Krishna conscious is the bona fide spiritual master, for he can solve the problems of life. Lord Chaitanya said that one who is master in the science of Krishna consciousness, regardless of his social position, is the real spiritual master. Kiba vipra kiba nyasi shudra kaninoy, jay Krishna tattva veta, say guru hoy. So it doesn't matter if you're a Brahmin, or if you're a Malecha, or born in the United States, or some distant place of the world that's far away from the Vedic system, or if you're a Nyasi, a sannyasi, if you're a master in the science of Krishna, Jai Krishna Tattva Veta, say Guru Hoy, then that person can be Guru. So here Arjuna accepts Krishna, the perfect master. And Sanjaya then says, at this point, Gudakesha, the master of sleep, he says, Govinda, I shall not fight. Nayotsya iti Govinda. And so he's gone from referring to Krishna as the killer of demons to Govinda. And Govinda means one who gives pleasure to the earth, one who gives pleasure to the senses, one who gives pleasure to the cow, and one who gives pleasure to his devotees, of course, as Raso Vaisa, the origin of rasa. Tamu vacha rishikesha prahasan nipaparata shanayor ubayor madhye vishidantam idam vachaha. And senayor ubayor madhye means they're right between two armies, armed to the teeth with swords, javelins, spears, bows and arrows, ready to kill each other. And yet they're taking this little parenthesis, this little moment to discuss something important. And so at that time, Krishna, smiling in the midst of both armies, he speaks the following words to the grief-stricken Arjuna. And Krishna turns to him and he says, Ashochan anvashochas tvam pragavaram chabashase. He said, you're talking pragyavadams. You know, you're giving me a philosophy of life. And this often happens with our friends. Our friends always have a deep philosophy of life. But Krishna is telling them, but this is not really wisdom. Nanu shochanti panditaha. Those who are wise lament neither for the living or the dead. So Krishna is telling them, all right, you want me to be your teacher? Let me explain something to you. You don't understand the nature of reality. You don't know who you are. Before you lecture me on Dharma and what is to be done, try to understand who you are. What is your position? And then he comes out with this verse, which is very powerful. He says, Natvevaham jatu nasam natvam neme janaripa nachayeva nabhavishama sarvavhayamatapara. He says, never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. And this is a very powerful verse. Apparently, he's just telling Arjuna, well, we're all eternal. But he's making a distinction. He's saying, I exist and you exist, and the kings exist forever, in the past, in the present, and in the future. But who is Krishna? Is he simply another jiva? No, he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Bhagavan, as we'll see. The name of the book is Bhagavad Gita. So this is a song of God himself. And God himself is telling you, I exist eternally and you exist eternally. So Ramanujacharya points out that this reflects an important verse from the Katha Upanishad, where it says that God is eternal among many eternals. There is one absolute eternal among thousands and millions of eternal living beings. Nityo nityanam chaitanas chaitananam eko bahunam yo vidadati kaman. And the one eternal is maintaining the rest of the eternals. Eko bahunam, the one within the many, yo vidadati kaman, is giving them their desires. Tam atmashtam yenu pashyanti dhiras tesham shanti shashvati netaresham. So he's saying, those who are wise, they can see this. They can understand that there's one supreme being and there's many, many living beings. So before Krishna begins breaking down the ontology of the soul, before he begins really discussing the problem of Atmagyan, he makes this distinction by saying there's one eternal supreme being, and then there's millions and millions of, an infinite number, in fact, of tiny jivas. So Prabhupada points out that the Mayavad theory that we're all one is not supported by Krishna here. And so in a kind of a subtle way, in a poetic way, he says, never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you knew all these kings. But since at least the time of Ramanuja, which is over 1,000 years ago, this verse has been interpreted as a kind of reflection on the Katha Upanishad, Nityo Nityanam, Chaitanas Chaitananam. Among thousands of eternal living beings, just one supreme living being who maintains them and gives them their desires. So right from the beginning, Krishna's putting Arjuna in his place. He's saying, wait a minute, I know you think you're a big hero and you have a position, and you have a kingdom to protect, and a family, and all these things. But think about who you are really. Before we even discuss the idea of duty, as the Greeks used to say, know thyself. Who are you? Before you think about, well, why am I here and what can I do in this world? Understand, who are you? So first of all, there's God. And second of all, there's the living beings. And what's the nature of the living being? What is the nature of Atma or Jiva? Krishna says, Dehinosmin yata dehe, komaram yovanam jara, tata dehantara praptir, dhiras tatra namuyati. This is an incredibly powerful verse. He says, as the embodied soul continually passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. The sober person is not bewildered by such a change. And again, he uses the word dhira for sober. Dhira, di, it means intelligence, like buddha, buddhi, di, the wise one. So with a little bit of wisdom, if you look around, you can see that this body is not the same body that I had when I was a child. And it's not the same body I had as a young man. Now I have a different body as an old man. I don't have all my teeth. The teeth that I have were not the same teeth that I had as a child. So how is it possible that all that changes? And yet I'm still here. Think about that, Arjuna. If you think about biology, take a seed and take a tree. They're not the same at all. What happened? The seed, well, we say, well, it transformed. Okay, it has a different form now than it had then, but it's the same tree. A butterfly begins as a worm. The worm has teeth and legs. The butterfly has wings and no teeth, but it's the same entity. How does the same entity move through different forms according to the evolution of his consciousness? That's being described by Krishna here. So it's a very powerful verse and a bit of a riddle that he's giving here. And in this way, he's establishing the idea of reincarnation or metempsychosis or metamorphosis, as the Greeks called it. Then he comes back to the problem at hand. And he says, all right, you're suffering. I understand that. Matra sparshas tu kantaya. Sitoshna sukadukata agama paino nityas tams tatikshasva bharata. He says happiness and distress come. Sometimes we're joyful. It's natural. In our life, much joy shall come. And sometimes we're distressed. That's also natural. These things come and go just like summer, winter. But they're a function of perception. They're a function of the perception of the senses. And you can't be bewildered by the senses. You have to go deeper. The mind and senses are kind of a function of our biological unit. But there's a higher reality that you need to think about. And he says, one who's disturbed by happiness and distress can be steady and eligible for amritavaya. And, you know, the translation is given liberation. But again, if we think of Srila Sridhar Maharaj, his particular point of view, we know that amrita, or immortality, must have a positive aspect with a divine relationship with Godhead. And we call this rasa. One can have a relationship in terms of neutrality, servanthood, friendship, parenthood, or even intimate love. Like Raghupati Upadhyay, friend of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in a conversation with Mahaprabhu. Mahaprabhu asked him, well, what do you see as the truth? And Raghupati Upadhyaya said, well, there's the Vedas, but I don't really care about the Vedas. What fascinates me is, how is it possible that the supreme absolute truth is crawling around in the garden of Nanda Maharaj? What did Nanda Maharaj do to get that position? So the fatherhood of Godhead, the sonhood of Godhead, these are all different relationships that one might have. And our idea of Amrita is not the same as Mukti. My brahmachari name was Mukunda. So I asked Srila Sridhar Maharaj, what does that mean? He said, well, you tell me. And I said, okay, well, Mukunda, it means the giver of liberation. There's a famous book by King Kulashekar called the Mukundamala Stotra, where he offers prayers to Krishna. So the giver of liberation, Mukti, Mukti Dadati. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj said, well, that's very good. You're a nice little Sanskrit student there. But no, the real meaning of Mukunda is like this. Think about it. It's Mukuda, Mukuda. Mukti Kukutsit Dadati. Krishna is someone who gives something that makes mukti look bad, Kukutsit. With the positive and progressive immortality or amrita that Krishna is giving, mukti looks kukutsit, looks bad. So Krishna is someone who gives something that makes liberation look bad. So Krishna is explaining to Arjuna at the very beginning, you need to understand the conception of the eternal soul properly. Know who you are. And then let's talk about duty. And we have plenty of time. Some people say that there on the plains of Kurukshetra during the battle, time stopped because after all, Krishna is time himself. So while this 18-chapter dialogue went on, everyone on the battlefield of Kurukshetra was frozen in time for a moment. So Krishna says about time, he says, Nasato vijate bhavo, na bhavo vijate sataha, ubayor api drishton tas tanayos tatvidarshabi. This is another very powerful verse. That's why the Gita is Upanishadic, because it has these short little texts that have a tremendous amount of connotation. He says, Nasato, of the asat, vijate bhava. There's no existence. Of the non-eternal, there's no existence. Na bhavo vijate sataha. On the other hand, what endures is never destroyed. Those who are seers of the truth, the Tattvadarshavi, have concluded that of the non-existence, there's no endurance. And of the eternal, there's no change. This they've concluded by studying the nature of both. So it's kind of interesting. There's some people who are not with us right now. They're not watching this talk. So in an hour or two, if you ask them, oh, did you see Mahayogi's talk? Then what talk? That talk doesn't exist. And they'll be right. It doesn't exist. It disappeared into the river of time. It has no existence. My words, my little studio, the books behind me, it has no real existence because it vanishes in the river of time. There was a Greek philosopher who said you can never stand in the exact same place in the river twice because the water changes and you change. So everything around us that you can see, feel, touch, hear is going to disappear. How can it be real? We think of reality and we say reality is hard matter. I don't know about the spirit. You guys believe in a bunch of woo-woo. I believe in stone, iron. But it's interesting, I'm looking for evidence of the Battle of Kurukshetra, for example. Did they use iron swords? Perhaps. If they used iron swords, those swords are gone. Why? Because iron rusts, it oxidizes. And over a period of time, that oxidization turns into dust and it's blown away by the wind. So you can say, I believe in iron, it's real. I believe in steel. I'm looking for something steel, here you are. This is steel. That I believe in because it's real, it's hard, I can touch it. But modern physicists like Einstein point out, you can't consider the nature of matter without taking time into consideration. It's the space-time continuum. Time and space exist in a parallel reality. Time is the fourth dimension. So if you study an iron sword over time, it will disappear. So then what is reality? If what we consider hard reality just disappears into dust on the wind, what lasts? And Krishna is telling Arjuna here, what lasts is the soul. Consciousness is real. In fact, consciousness is more real than the so-called matter that you wish to interpret as reality. Reality as such, matter, it's something that floats in a sea of consciousness like an iceberg on the ocean. And that's what Krishna is telling Arjuna here. There's no endurance of the changing body, Prabhupada points out, that the body is changing every moment by the actions and reactions of different cells is admitted by modern science. And thus growth and old age take place in the body, but the spirit soul exists permanently, remaining the same despite all changes of the body and mind. So that's the Vedic conclusion. Now, you may say that the Vedic conclusion is old-fashioned, that it doesn't really withstand the challenge of time. But if you study this closely and you think about it, you'll come to the conclusion, I'm satisfied, that the nature of consciousness is self-evident. And this is a problem for philosophy because we try to reason objectively and study what we think is matter. And we use the senses and the mind to do that. But when it comes to soul, we have no instrument for measuring the soul. It's something like if you want to see your eye, you want to understand what vision is, you want to see the eye. You can't see the eye by using the eye. Of course, you can cheat the idea by standing in front of a mirror, but you cannot see vision with the eye. So in the same way, you cannot see the soul with your mind and senses. You have to go more deeply into reality. Now Krishna begins explaining about the soul. And he says, Avinashi tuktad vidhi, yena sarvamidam tatam, vinasham avyayasyaya, nakaschit kartam arhati. So he's talking about what can be destroyed. And he says, that which pervades the entire body, you should know to be indestructible. No one is able to destroy the imperishable soul. And in the commentary, we find another note from the Upanishad, which says, Balagra Shatabhagasya Shatadakatpitasya Bhago Jiva Vigeya Sad Chanantyaya Kalpite. And this is interesting. It says, when the upper point of a hair is divided into 100 parts, and again, each of such parts is further divided into another 100 parts, each such part is the measurement of the dimension of the spirit soul. And then in Chaitanya Charitamrita, we find Kesha Gra Shatabhaga Sya, almost the same language. Shatangsha Sadrishatmaka, Jiva Sukshma Swarupo Yam, Sankhya Tito Hichitkanaha. There are innumerable particles of spiritual atoms. It's interesting, the word Atma and Atom are practically the same, which are measured as 1/10,000th of the upper portion of the hair. Now, this used to baffle me because I used to think that, okay, here's the dimension of the soul. It's 1/10,000th of the tip of a hair. So why can't you see that with a microscope, right? That's perfectly practical. It's very small, but I've looked at hairs under microscopes before. Why not magnify them 10,000 times? And one time I was listening to Srila Sridhar Maharaj talk about the nature of material reality. And he was dismissing the problem of the destruction of the universe by saying it's a point on a line in a plane. And I didn't understand what he meant by that. But the idea is that a line is composed of innumerable points. Any line has infinite points. Any plane has infinite lines. It's a mathematical certainty, right? So what is a point? Before you divide a point into 10,000 parts, you have to understand what is a point. And a point is infinitesimal. It's where two lines meet and recede into nothing, or recede into infinity. So the idea is, if you could take the infinitesimal and divide that 10,000 times, then you could probably understand where is the soul. But you can't divide the infinitesimal. It's already been divided infinitely. The point being that the perception of the soul is beyond our ken. It's beyond reason. It's beyond our ability to see, feel, taste, touch, or smell. Because feeling, taste, sound, vision, aroma proceed from the senses, which depend on the soul. So again, it's like trying to see your eye with the eye. It's a bit of a paradox. You can't see the soul, not with the vegetable eye. Krishna continues, Antavanta imedeha nityas yokta sharirina anashino prameyasya tasmad yasva bharata. So he says, in light of all this, understand that the body is sure to come to an end. It's perishable. And it's your duty as a soldier to fight. You're not creating anyone's death. You're just an instrument. And whose instrument are you? You're my instrument. I'm the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. So I'm asking you to do this as a soul. Go fight. And then again, if you think that you're the killer, you're not. Yainam veti handaram yaschainam manyate hatam ubo to na vijani to nayam hanti na hanyate. He says, it's not knowledge to think that you are the killer or the killed, because the soul doesn't do any of that. It's not your thing. You can't do that. Najayate mriyate vakarachin nayam bhutva bhavitavana bhuya ajo nitya shashvato yam purano nahanyate hanyamane sharire. Because for the soul, there's never birth or death. The soul doesn't come into being. and he doesn't stop existing. He's unborn, or she, eternal, ever existing, and primeval. The soul is not slain when the body is slain. And then again, in the Katha Upanishad, you find this almost exact similar verse, Najayate Mriyate Va Vipaschan. This is spoken by Yamaraj, the Lord of Death. Nayam Kutaschinna Babuva Kaschit. Ajo Nitya Shashvato Yam Purano. Yahanyate Hanyamane Sharire. So, the exact same verse appears in Katha Upanishad. Krishna says, so how can a person who knows that the soul is indestructible, eternal, unborn, and immutable kill anyone or cause anyone to be killed? Then he comes to this next verse, which is again very powerful. It's a beautiful metaphor. He says, as a person puts on new clothes, giving up old ones, the soul similarly accepts new material bodies, giving up the old and useless ones. So, as we were saying before, the change of body, it's an accepted fact. We're constantly changing bodies. So, at the end of our life, when we leave this body behind, we also change bodies again. Now, I don't know if anybody's still there because I was reading a little bit, but I'm going to try to bring everybody back. And I think I went through 20 or so verses. It's very difficult to go through the whole second chapter because all these ideas are very powerful, very heavy ideas. Yeah, I think I did 22 verses. And it's hard for me to understand how Krishna spoke this to Arjuna in a half hour or 20 minutes on the battlefield. So somebody suggested maybe Krishna stopped time for a while. They had a nice long talk. We don't know. Krishna can compress and expand time as he likes. I can't. I'm on a Zoom call. My Zoom calls go 40 minutes because I don't have the pro version, and then they get cut off. So I think I went about 50 minutes there. I can keep talking, but my throat is getting a little hoarse. I need to drink some water. Let me take some questions because we have such qualified people here. And I don't feel so qualified to speak these truths, but I heard them from very qualified people, and I'm being a parrot here. So the parrot is exposed. As soon as you ask him to say something interesting, he'll just go squawk, squawk, squawk. So.
So now questions, yes, Prabhu?
Yeah, let's have a question from my esteemed group of experts. We've got, Dandi Maharaj is with us, Tapanandini, Sevarupa Devi Dasi, Vrindavan Chandra is in Odessa, and Satyabhama Didi, in Morelia, de Russia, Strasvicha. And we've got Pranashish from the Emerald Island of saints, scholars, poets, and kings. And Shvaranangi Didi from St. Petersburg, Dharani Sundari, Tungarasa, and Elena Bitolina. Thanks for tuning in. Ekaterina Kolomyets and Lakshmi Priya Didi. Lakshmi Priya Didi, I know you. We were in Los Angeles. She drove me in her car from the Samskara wisdom of the immortal Avadut. I'm working on that project right now. It's fascinating. He hasn't got it to Vaikuntha yet, but he's working on it. Maybe one day we'll all go into the wisdom and blast off to Vaikuntha. But anybody has any questions about the immortal soul?
We have several questions about the second chapter.
Right.
There is one in the chat and several questions which I got from Facebook.
All right.
So let's start with the question from the chat because just now and here, yes. It is the question from Harini Sundari Devidasi. Question from my Indian friend. How Krishna explains karma? What is karma? How it works? And how it works for devotees?
All right, that's a great question. And I thank your Indian friend for asking that. But this question will be taken up more completely in a continuation of our talk. Karma is really covered in the third chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. But you see, karma is the problem of cause and effect. And before we come to the question of cause and effect, we're thinking about the nature of the soul or the Atma. Who am I? So karma has to do with what do I do? And even the second half, I'd like to talk about that next time in the second half. Okay? Karma basically means the law of action and reaction. Newton said every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So if that's true in what we can see in the material plane, why would that not be true in the metaphysical plane? But how exactly that works is not for us. Even Yamaraj was forced to take birth. This is a story. We'll tell it later, But I'm trying to concentrate on the first part of the second chapter of the Gita. And Krishna will get into karma in the second part of this chapter. But let's leave that as a mystery. It's a mystery. It's a mystery of the faith for the moment.
Okay, we have one more question from Andrei Reva. Actually, I know that he's a devotee, but I don't know his spiritual name. So his question was about the shloka which I published in our groups. It is shloka number chapter 220.
Okay.
The soul is neither born nor dies. It has neither been nor will it be created because it is unborn and eternal. It is ever youthful yet ancient. It is not destroyed when the body is destroyed. And so his question was, the soul, yes? It is not born and do not die. And what about other worlds?
Okay, what is the question then? What about other worlds?
Yes, the question is what happens in other worlds with the soul?
Well, given that the soul is eternal, the jiva can experience life in different worlds. Okay, there's upper worlds and lower worlds, from Mahatala, Rasatala, some of the darker lower worlds up to the Bhuloka plane. And then there's Shvargaloka, Satyaloka, Mahaloka. And then there's a higher plane with Goloka, right? It's a higher plane. Now, higher and lower are relative terms, aren't they? So if you're in Australia, what's higher? What's higher to you is in the southern part of the universe. So we think that the description given in the Bhagavatam and other places is a description of psychological or conscious planes of being. Just as we talk about, if you're watching the news, they'll say, and now the world of sports. There is no world of sports. Oh, yes, there is. The world of sports is for everybody who loves sports. And then they say, okay, and now we go to Wall Street. And they talk about Wall Street, but they're really talking about big companies who have control over different parts of the world, like Coca-Cola or Apple or Google. And Google is not located in Wall Street. Wall Street's kind of a metaphor for that. So when we say upper and lower planetary systems, we're describing metaphorically different states of consciousness. So the Gayatri Mantra especially mentions Bhu, Bhuvar, and Sva as higher levels of existence for human consciousness, beginning with Earth, and then going up to the mental plane, the plane of higher intelligence, and finally the spiritual plane. The sun is a metaphor for these different levels of existence because it gives us light. But the real light of the universe is the soul, or the jiva. So how the jiva travels through different planes of existence, different kinds of material bodies, this is the stuff for spiritual exploration. And it's the kind of thing that we find covered in the Bhagavatam. I'm not sure I've answered that question. I'm a bit distracted. Tell me the question again.
The soul is not born and do not die.
Right.
And what about other worlds?
Okay, so it means the soul existed before and it will exist in the future. But the soul undergoes a certain kind of evolution through different life forms, maybe from primitive life forms up to the highest life forms. Consciousness, as Krishna explains later in this chapter, he says consciousness is everywhere. You will not find anywhere where they're looking for life on Mars, right? And now they found some craters with dried up lakes, and they know there was water there at one time. And water means life, so I'm sure they'll find some fossils there, ancient fish or something. Who knows what the Martian fish will be, you know? But the point is, consciousness is everywhere. You can't really find a place where there is no consciousness. So that means the jiva exists everywhere and in many different kinds of living situations. Sometimes you look at things like in Antarctica, where they have sub-zero weather all the time. It goes down to like 50 degrees below zero. How can anything live there? But they find little plants, lichen, bacteria that have a very slow metabolism. Or in the desert here in Mexico, it's so hot, nothing can live. But they find microscopic entities, special kinds of cactus, that they have an incredibly slow metabolism. So on one level, even stone, perhaps, certain kind of stone, crystals, you know, may have some conscious energy moving atomic particles into a special kind of arrangement. So the point is, life exists in all worlds in many different forms.
Okay, thank you. I have one more question from myself. During your talk, you mentioned the principle of dharma and the duty. And also it was said that we are souls, yes, and that we do not belong to this world. So if we are souls and we do not belong to this material world, then why do we need to perform our duty to fulfill the idea of dharma? Why, if we belong to another world?
That's Arjuna's question. That's exactly Arjuna's question. That's what he's troubled about. He's thinking, why do I have to do this? What if, can't I just go to the forest and renounce? You know, I want to be like Dandi Maharaj, you know, I want to be a sannyasi, give up the world, you know. Why can't I do that? And Krishna tells him, well, it's not so easy, is it? You know, you can't deny your dharma. You know, you have your karma and your dharma. Your dharma means what you do. I'm trying to reserve that for our next talk a little bit so that we have some interest and people will join us again next time. But why do we have to do anything at all? Well, Krishna tells Arjuna, you can't not do anything. It's right there in the Gita, 3rd chapter. He says, you can't not do things. You can't stop actions even for a moment. Try it sometime. You're breathing. When you breathe, you kill living entities. So there's karma on your soul. You have the stain of sin and you're going to go to hell, you know. So the question is, if I belong to another world, why do I have to do anything in this world? Right? Well, it gets back to why are we in this world? So we think, the Vedic teachers believe, the soul is in this world out of a sort of God complex, all right? I'm not happy being a servant of God. I want to play God. So give me a playground. And God says, okay, you have a playground. What do you want? You want sex, drugs, rock and roll, fast broadband internet connection, Netflix, what else? Babies. Okay, we'll get a dog. All right. You can have food. What kind of food do you like? All right, that's all yours, but you have to earn your living by the sweat of your brow, as God told Adam and Eve, you know. We're cast down from the higher level of pure consciousness, and now we're in this world. So part of our journey here, our path, is to understand there's a higher power. It's not just me. Actually, I'm not really God. You have to leave the God complex behind. Your God complex is part of your ego, right? Ahankara, ego, means I do it. It's me. I did it. Give me credit. And Krishna tells him, Arjuna, you don't want the credit. Don't take the credit. Credit means sin. Credit means karma. All that can be yours, but don't. Stay away from the kara. You know, the aham part's okay. But how do you realize yourself as a servant of the infinite, you know, as a part of something higher? You do sacrifice. So that gets to the ethical part, right? We said before, the Gita 2nd chapter divides in 2 parts. One is about the soul. When you know who you are and you think, okay, I get it. I'm a soul, right? I got all these other souls. I have to fight with them to keep the wolves away from the door. I have to pay the rent, you know, so let's fight with the others. No. You have to do sacrifice, okay? Sacrifice. It means to make your life sacred by giving something up. And what do you give up? Your ego in the higher sense. And how do you do that? Well, in Kali Yuga, what's the sacrifice? It's Sankirtan. Sing the glories of God. So if you do that, you'll find it separates you from other people. They don't want to hear about the glories of God. You have to either you have to live a more reserved life and separate yourself from people who are interested in football, sex, drugs, rock and roll, you know, and say, that's not me. I'm sorry. I don't want to get intoxicated. I don't want to kill other entities and eat them, you know. I think the sexual thing is fun, but let's try to keep it to one person. You know, let's try to be monogamous at the very least, you know. And as far as gambling goes, it just makes you crazy, right? Speculation, well, you know, that's an extension of the idea of gambling. I don't know. I'm a terrible speculator. I love to read books, but I try to read books in light of what I was taught by my gurus. So sacrifice. What is sacrifice? How do you do it? How does that play out? Krishna begins with the idea of sacrificing to the gods. He says, if you don't make sacrifice to the gods, there's no rain. And that harkens back to the Vedas. That's what the Vedas are all about. Vedas explain how you make the sacred fire. But in a metaphorical sense, now we're in the middle of Kali Yuga. We're surrounded by coronavirus, needles, machines, the dark internet, the web. You know, building a sacred fire is not going to do it. You have to use the fire of the holy name. So I was asked by my guru to sacrifice my life into the holy name of Krishna. I didn't know. I was a fool. When I was in Westwood in the 1970s, there was this guy, Guru Swami Muktananda. And my friends told me, you got to check him out. He's brilliant. You know, Crosby, Stills, Nash, you know, Joni Mitchell, all those guys, they go to Muktananda. Really? What do I have to do? It's only $500 for an intensive weekend. And $500 in 1970, that's like $5,000 today. And I thought, what? This is the rich man's yoga. And then I met the devotees, you know, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, you know. Where's my incense? Oh, here it is. Yeah, won't you buy some incense, sir? You know, hey, read this book. Read the Bhagavad Gita. It will change your life. Come to our Sunday feast. Sunday feast? What's that? We give you food. Food, huh? Yeah, it's holy prasadam. It's offered to Radha and Krishna. Rukmini and Dwarkadish, huh? How much is that? Is that like $5,000 for an intensive? No, man, it's free. It's free. Get high naturally. And I thought, okay, now that's something I can do. But I was cheated. They lied to me. They told me it was free, but it wasn't free. Muktananda wanted $500, a measly $500 for a 3-day weekend. And that was it. Three days, $500. You got the Shakti pot. He touched your forehead. You know, oh my God, I saw the Brahmajyoti. I'm perfect. What did Prabhupada want? It was free. No, Prabhupada wanted your soul. Like the old Bob Dylan song, I gave her my heart, but she wanted my soul. So I gave Krishna consciousness my heart, but it wasn't enough. They wanted my soul. Prabhupada wanted my soul. ISKCON wanted my soul. Sridhar Maharaj wanted my soul. Govinda Maharaj wanted my soul. Okay, so that's sacrifice, you know. Try to do some sacrifice. Now I'm old. When I was a young man of only 22, I was in Hollywood Boulevard with 100 devotees, and we would do Harinam every day. And I would jump up and down and stamp my feet on the cement until when I came home at night, my feet hurt so much I had to soak them in hot water for 2 hours, you know, and that was Harinam. Now, what can I do? I'm on Zoom for an hour every Friday trying to tell people the meaning of the Bhagavad Gita. You know, I don't know. Sanjay, somewhere it's written, you know, Vyas may know, Narada, he knows something. Shukadev, he knows, you know. Do I know the Bhagavad Gita? I've been studying this book for about 50 years now, you know. I first found it on vacation in Mexico. I was staying at the house of some really pretty girls, and they talked about yoga. And I thought, wow, I'm in love. Let me find out more about yoga. And I read the Bhagavad Gita. I thought, what is this? This is it. I have to meet this man. I have to know this Prabhupada. I want to surrender to his feet. And I couldn't do that until years later, you know, but I did, and I was very happy. So what is sacrifice? What is surrender? That's the ethical problem. See, Brajasundari, and I didn't really want to get into that because that implies work. It's nice when everything is free, and we go to the free Sunday feast and listen to the free lecture. But when they want your soul, whew, that's more difficult. So it's very interesting, though, the Indian idea of Dharma, because it's not the same for everybody. There's Shudra. Shudra Dharma means be honest. don't steal. Kshatriya Dharma means protect the Brahmins, protect the kingdom. Brahmana Dharma means speak the truth. And all those things are very difficult. Honesty and speaking the truth are not the same thing. Honesty means you say, where did you put the money? And I say, it's in the box. Speaking the truth means I ask you, what is sacrifice? And I say, I don't know. I have to go to the jungle. I have to go to the desert, look at the stars, pray to Jesus, think about Krishna, read the Bhagavad Gita, and come back in 10 years, and then I can tell you, okay, I know what the truth is. I'm a Tattvadarshini. But if you're not a Tattvadarshini, you have to go to the Guru. And then you say, what do I do now, Guru? And he says, well, who are you? Oh, I'm so-and-so. I live in such and such. I have so many years. The Guru says, well, why don't you, do some work and give some money to the temple, Or he says, what I need you to do is publish the Prapana Jivanamrita. You're like, okay, cool. I want to do that. But it's not the same for everybody, right? Dharma for Tapanandini is different from Dharma for B.A. Dandi Swami. He has a mission to run, right? And so there's this interesting division of Dharma, right? There's the practical, what you do in this world Dharma, and then there's what's your true self-interest Dharma. And that's what the second part of the second chapter is all about. Svadharma ninadam shreya para dharma bhayavaha. Do your Dharma. But what is Dharma? It means your self-interest. What's the self-interest of the soul? And how do we do that? What is sacrifice? So my sacrifice is I'm getting up early on Friday morning and tuning in with Rajasundari and putting my book in front of me and saying, okay, let's look at the Bhagavad Gita. Everybody should read the Bhagavad Gita. That's my job now. That's my Dharma. But, maybe later my Dharma is I have to take out the garbage. So it's a very, very difficult thing, Vrajasundari. You have to really find your path, you have to talk to your friends, but find out who your real friends are. That's even more difficult work. I never met Pranashish, I've never, maybe I did. Maybe I met him in I think I met you in India once. I remember you were there, but very young, as a white-clad brahmachari at the ashram of Sridhar Maharaj. And it was an initiation. And I was like, who are those guys? But somehow I connected with him on the internet. Now we're friends, right? In my English class, they ask you, we're doing present perfect. Have you ever, right? Have you ever met someone on the internet? I ask my students, have you ever met someone on the internet? And they say, no, teacher, no, I don't. I said, what about me? I'm your teacher. I met you on the internet. Oh yeah. They met Tapanandini, But I met Tapanandini on the internet. I was in Chiang Mai, Thailand, and giving a talk. And she was like, who's that guy? He's interesting. I'd like to talk to him some more, right? Dandi Maharaj, I know personally. I always remember, I had tea. One day we went to the Hermitage Museum to see the works of the Impressionists, because that's what you do when you're in Petersburg. And we had a nice little tea at a sidewalk cafe. And I thought, isn't this nice? I'm sitting here in a beautiful city with a beautiful museum, talking to a beautiful man, having a beautiful cup of tea, and the sky is lovely. This is my life. I'm so happy. So sacrifice can make you happy. I don't know. That's my answer for the sacrifice. But, we all have to, Srila Sridhar Maharaj, he had all these little sayings that he just kept saying again and again and again, like die to live. And another one was dive deep into reality. Dive deeper. You have to go deeper. So in every conversation, be it Ramananda Roy, Samvad, Savitri talking to death, Kunti and Karna, the motto is always go deeper. Arjuna and Krishna. So Arjuna, you would think, okay, if the Supreme Personality of Godhead told you, you need to do sacrifice, go fight, that would be it, right? You would pick up your Gandiva bow and go, all right, I'm ready to go. Not Arjuna. It's like, but wait a minute, can you go deeper? Can you tell me more? I want to hear more. So I hope I haven't bored anybody. We're going to try to go deeper on the same subject. We're cosmonauts in the inner space world of the Bhagavad Gita, and we'll explore the second part of the second chapter, which is even more difficult than the first part, because now the rubber meets the road. You have to actually do something. But we'll do that next week, same time, same channel, here on Brajasundari's Gita Talks, unless we have any more questions.
Yes, Mahayogi Prabhu. So this question will be the last one. It is the question from Dandi Maharaj. I will read it now, but if you will not understand me, you can read it in the chat also. It is in English.
Oh, I see there's a chat.
Yes. So, dear Maharaj, from one special point of view, the Christian conception of soul seems to be developed in order to avoid depreciation of human life value. For example, if soul is eternal and our body is just piece of dull matter, then killing is not a big deal, right? This logic actually seems not to be true. So, can you give some explanations about ethics based upon such a view of a mortal soul?
I'm not sure what he means by such a view, but I think I understand what you're saying. So I can't really speak to the Christian conception of soul, but what you're saying is something like this. According to the Christian conception, you have one life to live. So this life is precious. Therefore, thou shalt not kill. Human life is this very special gift. You only live once. And so then you have to put a great value on this life. Is that right, Raj? Okay. So therefore, murder is prohibited unless it's done by the church. If the church kills you, it's okay, right? The church comes to Mexico, and there's a famous Latin American author, I think he's, Tapanandini would know, Uruguayan or Argentinian, Eduardo Galeano. And he says the Spanish arrived in America, and they came with the holy book. And they said, close your eyes. They said, we had the land and they had the book. And they said, close your eyes. And they gave us the book. They said, and then when we opened our eyes, we had the book and they had the land. Something like that. I don't know if I'm telling that joke perfectly, but the idea is if the Catholic Church comes and burns your land and kills your mother and your children and burns your gods, that's cool, right? Slavery, okay? Black people are not really human beings. They're property. So it's okay to own them, sell them, treat them like furniture, whip them, because they're Black people. They're not really people. The only people who are people are white men. So to murder a white man is a crime. But to murder a Black woman, stuff happens. So, thou shalt not kill. Yeah, so I'm trying to talk about the ethical considerations of such a view of the immortal soul. That view of the immortal soul seems to be very exclusive. the only people with an immortal soul are the people who come to my church and confess there. So it's not very democratic. Now, the Christians argue that the people of India are fatalists. And because if the soul is eternal, then why should I do any work? What difference does it make? See, it doesn't make any difference. Why should I do a good job instead of a bad job? If I'm thinking there's only one life, I've got to get it right to go to heaven, otherwise I'm going to hell, then I have a motivation to be ethical, right? So Maharaj Dandi is very astute, and this has been argued by Hegel and others, that the people of India are primitive savages who don't want to do any work because they're fatalists. I don't think that that's true. I think, later on, Christian ethics were destroyed by Kant, because Kant said, well, you can't really prove God, you can't prove the soul, you can't prove anything. So we'll just base our ethics on being nice to other people. I will treat you the way I hope you will treat me. That was Kant's moral imperative. But it seems to me that you can construct another imperative out of the idea that the soul is eternal, God is eternal. There's a relationship between the two. What's the relationship? Sacrifice. If you don't make sacrifice, you're going down. I think that's very simple. So I don't think that the idea of the eternal soul is bad for ethics. But let's take this up in our next conversation. What a great question from Dandi Maharaj. Dandi Maharaj is a real thinker and philosopher. And I like reading your posts on Facebook because you seem to know what's going on. I don't want to flatter you because then you'll become my enemy. But, we need some Tattva Darshadis, and Dandi Maharaj is pretty much a Tattva Darshadi because he thinks about these things. Very difficult to spend your time. Thinking is not easy, right? Thinking is really hard work. That's why nobody wants to do it. Most of the time we're just on automatic pilot, wake up, water the plants, get on the bus, work the machine, get on the bus, come home. There's no thinking there. But Dandi Maharaj is somebody he likes to spend his time thinking. So thank you very much for blessing our little meeting here with your presence. Hare Krishna. So I think Brajasundari told us that's our last question. So I think we're going to leave it here. Thank you all very much once again for tuning in. There's Ananta Shesh. I see Oleg's on here, Madhavilata, Nava Giovanna, Arjun Das. I think he's in Ukraine. Arjun Das, he's another one. All these great surrendered souls. I feel like I'm speaking with the sages of Naimisharanya, I happen to be, I just leave you with this. I was in Ukraine for the Veda Life at one of the festivals we had on an island. And I woke up one morning, I wanted to go to the class. It was one of the last days. And I went to the gathering place and there was nothing. The pandal was gone. The stage was gone. And I walked around. This is out in the forest on an island in the Dnieper River. And it's just a beautiful morning, but where are the devotees? Somehow I found in that forest sort of a kiosk temple that they'd constructed, a small kiosk with a little onion dome made out of wood. And I thought, oh, that looks just like in the painting of Maharaj Prickett when he's hearing Bhagavatam from Shukadev Goswami. Maybe the devotees are over this way. And I kept walking, and in the mist, I saw a large group of devotees gathered around Madhusudan Maharaj, and he was giving a Bhagavatam class. And I felt, wow, this is like the sages of Naimisharanya. I was so happy. Oh no, they haven't disappeared. Here they are. You know, like there's that song, Yeanilo Prema Dhamma. Where have they gone? You know, where's Rupa Goswami? Where's Raghunath? Where are they? Help me, I'm lost. And I look around and I see, no, there's Pranashish, there's Dandi, there's Tapanandini, there's Arjuna Das from, Ukraine. Anyways, so thank you all very much for allowing me to participate in this. We'll try to do it again next Friday. I cede back to you, Vrajasundari.
Hi. Yes, Hare Krishna, Mahayogi Prabhu. The next Friday we will have the second chapter of the second chapter. Yes.
The second chapter of the second chapter.
Okay. Thank you.
All
Jai
right.
Mahayogi Prabhu ki Jai. Jai.
Bhakti Vrinda ki Jai.
Jai.
Bye
Hare
bye.
Krishna. Obeisances to everybody. Bye bye. Dandavats.